let's take a look at the setup that I've got for making an attractive render of a female character. So there's a couple of basic concepts that if you read around or watch tutorials, you'll probably get. One is that you need a couple of special lights. One's called a key light, which I have here. And that's your main lighting source. For example, if you're outside in the sun, wherever the sun is coming from would be the key light. Then you need a rim light. A rim light is just a light, usually a bit off to the side, or perhaps a little bit behind the character, or model in a real life character in 3D, that adds a little bit of light around the silhouette of the character to kind of help bring them out from the background. Then you need a fill light, and the fill light in this case is a flash, and the flash is something I've got attached to the camera here. And then, of course, you need a focus on your character. Typically, a model or person, you want to focus on one or the other of their eyes. In this case, I've split the difference and I'm focusing between the two eyes because I want to automate that as much as possible. So how is all that done? It's actually quite easy in the case of the focus, right? The camera, if you take a look at the camera properties, there's a depth of field, and and you can pick an object. And so I've chosen to focus on the empty that I've named focus, and that focus empty is here, right between her eyes. And wherever she goes, wherever she looks, wherever the camera goes, wherever anything happens, that focus is always right there. And so the camera is always going to be focused on there. So we can zoom in, we can go off to the side, we can come from below. Whatever we do, the focus is right there, and everything else is out of focus outside of that plane of focus. Then the other thing, of course, is you want all those lights to be pointing at her, right? The case of, I've got these sun lamps here, and the sun lamps have damp tracks pointing at her. So no matter where I move the sun lamp, it actually is casting a shadow on her in a sensible way, for where that sun lamp is. The final fill lamp, or fill light I have, is an area light here, and that is, well, filling in the lights here. And it's especially important in Eevee, which doesn't have indirect lighting. What does it look like if I turn this flash off? Watch over here, the render. I'm going to turn off that flash. Boom. So all these kind of dark areas, they look a little bit dead. And the reason they look dead is because Eevee doesn't have indirect lighting. In a real scene, a real life person, for example, this white of her shirt and this pink of her shirt here would be lighting up this area on her neck and on the bottom of her chin and such. And everything in the scene would be contributing to that shadow area being filled in by a little bit of something. And so the flash, well, first of all, it sort of compensates for that. It doesn't compensate perfectly because the flash only has one color. It doesn't have, pink and white and brown and all those colors there. So it's not perfect, but it does help a little bit to keep those dark areas from looking so dead. Pardon me. Okay, so what's the next thing? The next thing is the flash is great up close, but what happens if I back up? When I come back here, she's all going to be dark. The flash isn't going to be filling in as much anymore, except I've solved that problem a little bit. If you take a look at the flash properties, you'll see that the power here is 146 watts when I'm back here. But now watch this power here as I zoom in over here. Boom. 2.5 watts when I'm this far from her. How is that possible? Well, it's possible using a driver. There's a driver on here to change the wattage. Okay, so I've got the perfect setup here, right? I've got a flash that's attached to the camera, so it's always going to be kind of coming from the same area as the camera, so it's a perfect fill, right? And to some extent, that is good, and I've modeled this based off of reality, right? I have done some photography in my day, and when I did, if I didn't have an assistant, I would hold the flash at arm's length, say about a meter away from the camera, but it would always follow me around wherever I go. But what if I was rich and had an assistant or a couple of assistants who could move my flashes around and place them where I want them? Well, wouldn't that be nice, especially if I back up and the flash is super powerful, and then I decide I want to have these items in the foreground. Well, now these items are in the foreground, but they're totally blown out. These things are darn near looking white as snow. They're not actually white in real life. They have a color, but this flash being 239 watts like it is, and being right next to these objects is just blowing out the colors there. So this isn't a perfect setup. I would love it if someone would take the flash, keep it over here, and shine it on her. And to that end, we want to, again, emulate real life. I want to have a helper to move that flash around. So let's see, how can I set that up? Let's pick a good pose. I like this pose here. This will be the pose we come back to afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a default A pose, turn off the rendering, and I'm going to take this flash here, which is parented to the camera. I'm going to unparent that. Okay, and I'm going to move it forward. And let's say I've moved it here. It looks still quite far away. Let's put it, I don't know, maybe 2 heights of her away. She's probably about 1.5 meters tall, so that'd be about 3 meters away. Let's place it right at eye level there. And then let's make the size of it about 1.5 meters. That way the bottom of the light will kind of shine up below her chin and the top of the light will come from above her head. So that seems like a good spot there. Make it exactly eye level and maybe a bit off to the right, let's say. All right, so that's cool. Now the flash is there, but when I move my camera around, the flash stays in that same place. So that flash isn't moving where we want it to move. So how can we move it? How can we have our assistant move the flash for us? And the trick there that I think will make it happen is we're going to parent it to the focus empty that we're using already between her eyes, right? So let's grab the flash, let's grab the focus, and then let's do parent, keep transform. Great, now if I move her around the scene, the flash moves around with her. You see how on the upper right corner here, the flash is moving around with her, and that way it's always a same distance from her. But what it's still not doing is if I move the camera, say way up here, to look down at her, then the flash is still here. We want it to move up. So all we simply do is take that focus empty, go to the constraints, and add a adapt track constraint. What are we going to track to? We're going to track to the camera. Now, by default, the way I've got this focus, it's focus empty is the y-axis is pointing back, and so when it wants to point at the camera, it spins around, and so now the flash goes behind her. So I need to actually choose the negative y-axis. So now the flash is in front of her, and it's a little bit down. Why is it a little bit down? Because the camera is a little bit down, right? The camera is here, right around her belly button. So let's move the camera up so that's like right about eye height here. And sure enough, now the flash is back where it belongs. All right, let's spin around, maybe off to the side like that. And look, the flash here is off to the side. Now, the other thing we can do is because the flash is always a constant distance from her, we don't need a driver on the power. The power is about 22 watts now. Let's delete that driver and just set it to 22 watts. So now we don't need a driver. We've eliminated the driver. We've added a constraint, but generally speaking, you prefer constraints over drivers. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like. Here's our test pose. All right, that is lit up a bit from below. It looks like the camera should be below her. It is. The camera is about level with her chest here, or this her right hand here, and it's looking up. Cool. Let's take that flash and turn it off and see what it looks like without the flash. There. Where's the flash? Oh, right. It's not a child of the camera anymore. Now it's a child of the focus empty. So we're going to take that flash, turn it off. Yep. Sure enough, it kind of makes her look dead there in those dark areas. Bring it back in. Great. And if I spin the camera around her, the flash just goes around her and illuminates her from whatever angle I happen to be, because I have an assistant that's following around. In this case, I'm about the same distance as the flash. But if I come all the way back here, the flash again is following around, always illuminating her, but also it's not blowing out the colors of these objects in the foreground. These things are now about the right color. So that ends up being a much better experience for trying to get a good render or a good picture of my character. So I'm pretty happy about that. There we go, we finally got her in the center. And that's beautiful. And here the camera's right up next to her, but now the flash is way behind the camera. Still, it illuminates her the way we want the flash to illuminate her. She's still all in focus, everything's perfect. And you get a very attractive light and a very attractive focus no matter where you go. The focus empty also being an empty that you can move around, you can always pick something else that you want to focus on. So say we're way down here, very close in, and we want to focus on her lips. We can always go ahead and grab the focus, empty, send it down here to her lips. Now her lips are in focus and everything else is out of focus. Generally speaking, you wouldn't want that. Like I say, generally speaking, you want that empty to be right between her eyes. All right, that's all I've got for you for today. So, in the immortal words of the Drink